Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Amy Latessa from UCIT Department of Research and Development. And as our culminating speaker and workshop of the 2018 Data and Computational Science Series, we're delighted to have Dr. Olga Scrivner here to give a talk on the importance of data visualization. Dr. Scrivner is a research scientist at the Cyber Infrastructure for Network Science Center in the School of Informatics, Computing, and Engineering at Indiana University, a faculty fellow at the Center of Excellence for Women in Technology, and a corporate faculty in data analytics at Harrisburg University of Science and Technology. She has significant expertise in developing web application tools for data mining and visualization using Shiny and R, and has developed and taught many workshops and bootcamp courses on these tools. She has practical experience in computational linguistics, exploratory data analysis, non-parametric statistical methods, and time series analysis. Her current research at the Cyber Infrastructure for Network Science Center focuses on mapping of occupational landscape and educational attainment with specific emphasis in understanding the healthcare workforce in areas affected by the opioid epidemic. The Data and Computational Science Series is hosted by UC Libraries and UCIT Research and Development and supported by a Universal Provider Award from UC's Office of the Provost for Faculty Development. We were awarded another round of funding, so keep your eye out for the 2019 series. Without further ado, I would like to thank everyone for attending and to welcome our distinguished guest, Dr. Olga Scrivner.
Thank you for this great opportunity to share with you, first of all, what we do at IU, but also share with you my passion, my personal passion about data visualization, data analytics, or anything with data. And of course, if you stay in later to the Shiny workshop, my greatest passion of all is the Shiny R. And I would like also to ask you to give a thank you to Amy, and Jane for what they did to bring us here and to be able to share with you this exciting, I would say, workshop about data analytics. So I'd really like to thank you for doing that. So in our center, which is Cyber Infrastructure for Network Science Center, we actually strive to exactly do what we see here, build a collaborative interdisciplinary research project that work on the data, but more importantly, that provides you ability to get insights from your data, so actionable insights. And we strive to understand our current scientific research, and as you can see probably, it's been changing, like in the past decade. So what's happening is it's becoming, our science landscape is increasingly becoming more collaborative, more interdisciplinary, and we see the great shift. And if you notice from what's been a key for previous scientific landscape, we have a star scientist that now turned into a research team, for instance, and we go from just one discipline to multidisciplinary research, and we go from just single specimen to data stream. And all this, in fact, require different tools, right? So we know that impact of scientific research depends on how well others can understand. And why it's important, because if they understand, they can perceive further and take action. So it's very important for make other people understand our research. And what can be a better tool, if not the tool that combine different methods and technique from different disciplines, and so we collectively can just fine-tune and interpret our results. So, but we also need a lot of information, right? And a lot of information. And if you've probably heard that or seen this quote, that information is the currency in our digital age, right? But if you get a lot of information, what happens? We get lost, right? So we need a sort of a map. When you get lost in the woods, you look at the map. So we need some sort of visual map for our research. And that's what our goal is. First, to turn data into information, then turn information into insights. All right. And now you are going to ask me, I know you will, how to make our insights actionable, because that's what's most important. So for example, a critical challenge, regardless what you're doing right now at the university, whether you're at the CEO level or whether you're teaching, is to decide how much money, for instance, how to spend your limited resources most productively. So again, it could be your course you're teaching, or it could be you taking a very important decision for the future infrastructure. So how to spend all the limited resources you have most productively. For that, we all must have a good understanding of how the system of our science, innovation, technology works, number one. We have to have a good knowledge of where productive research is done. So we cannot just look and ask, how well you're doing in this research. We need to have a more global map of maybe centers of activity, like a bursting activity of different research, so we can build our decision-making policies. And we also need to be aware how progress proceeds, not across just institutions, but maybe across individuals. Because each individual meet another individual, we create network, right? So network is very important for this. So to answer those questions, actually, you can look at different metrics, right? But we are an institution, so what are our deliverables? Mostly, we have funding, right? We have research, we have publication. So this is our value, like our money value. So you should, to answer all those questions about productivity and investment, we should look at funding, at research, at publishing, and also maybe at social media, because each institution may have its own social media outlet and how well it, access the community that needs to be addressed, or even working with on a project with, for instance, Children in Hospital, the community, how well they can get your impact that you created in your article. Do they read articles? Probably not. So we need to figure out how to provide those actionable insights to those community members.
So
And
the real issue is impact. We really need to, all these papers and whatever we do, in the end, we have to figure out what is the impact of the institution.
It's exactly a good point. And speaking of that, our data is very dynamic, right? Very complex. So getting insights from this complex dynamic data require now a different type of computing. Not just HPC, but more like advanced cyber infrastructure. And if you look over the last maybe 30 years, the HPC had developed from just a very few, very fast computers into something that became this complex set of organizational practices, technical infrastructure, social norms, etc. And the whole point of those infrastructure systems is to help us as researchers to do our job, basically. At the distance, that's the most important. You don't have to be sitting all here to work on the same project. So, and if you look at this map sort of cyber infrastructure, all those components become extremely important. So it's not just a storage system, right? It's not just HPC. We gain a visualization system. We need to monitor jobs, of course, but we also need to have long-term financial and strategic planning. And we have a network also. And finally, we need some kind of new metrics, because just CPU unit count is not enough anymore to understand the value of investment and return of investment. So with that said, I'd like to test you guys here of how much do you know about Ohio Supercomputing Center. Okay, do you have your phones or computers? All right, okay. So what I'd like you to do is to go to this link, and it's simply Poll, E-V, P-O-L-L. So POLLEV.com.
Is capitalization important?
A capitalization is not important, I believe. So here's the link in more larger content. So POLLEV.com /Scrivner poll, all one word. So So when you get there, please just wait a little bit to give a chance to other to join. So I'm gonna ask you, be honest, it's all anonymous, I'm not gonna give you a grade for that. So we have your Ohio Supercomputing Center, and most of you were talking about computing. So I'm gonna ask you, how often do you use your resources provided? So once a week, once a month, once a year, or you really plan, honestly planning on using it in the future? And Jane, you can use it as a report as well. All right. Everyone had a chance to answer? All right. It sounds like you have a lot of potential, very interested candidate here to work with Supercomputing Center, and that means also, Emmy, the workshops, for training workshops, becomes very important. So you have 75% who really eager to learn. All right. Okay. So our next question. All right. I'm gonna go to the next question. It's gonna be hard quiz, I promise. All right. Can you name at least one cluster, OSC cluster? So you just type the word of a cluster. And if you don't know, don't look at the screen. Because it may be wrong too. So another question, what's this type of visualization is called? Word cloud. And what's the most important in the word cloud for visual perspective? The size, right? Remember, so the bigger size gets, then that means more users or more answers per. So we'll get to see which clusters are mostly recognized in this audience. And of course, we don't do any, here, there's no pre-processing involved, no stemming involved, so we have Owen and Owens. So it shows you that you always need to have computational linguistics as part of your program in the future, because you have Owen and Owens, the same thing, but they're not recognized here. And just step back from, yeah.
Which one is it for real? I forget.
Owens. It's
For
named
real?
after Jesse Owens.
Which one?
Owens.
I just wondered if it was Owen or Owens. It
Yeah,
sounds
which
like
one?
it's Owen.
It's good, yeah. So what was the
It's
question?
named after Jesse Owens,
Owens.
the
Owens.
famous runner. So
All
it's
right.
Owens.
Did we miss anything?
Well, there's a new one that
Okay,
just came.
okay, all right, good. All right, so let's move to next question.
Inside information.
Yeah, Jane, do not answer.
Okay.
All right, now, there's new HPC clusters coming or being deployed recently. Insiders, inside information do not answer, but let's see if anyone have heard, known, seen anything that's happening.
I think that was an insider who answered.
Insider? Insider jobs?
Yeah.
All right, so with that said, it is, Big Red is at IU, by the way. They have Big Red 1, now they switched to Big Red 2, and now switching to something else. All right. Go Hoosiers. All right, so we got 80%, perfect. Karst also at IU, I don't know if you have, all right, Karst also at IU, that's why I put it there. But anyway, the answer is, yeah, Dell, Pritzer, and it's been deployed, right, the beta version of it. And if you have any questions, Jane, Amy, to learn more about this, I guess, super powerful resource. Great.
A lot of GPUs, a lot for machine learning, artificial intelligence, and it's very underused right now.
Make a note.
Yeah, right. So do your project.
All right. That's great. All right. Thanks for you all got A+. All right. Great. Thanks for spending time on doing that. And I'm going back to where we started. All right. Now, we are at the point to talk about cyber infrastructure framework, because we'll see how complex our data sets are, how much cyber infrastructure system involved into different components, planning, new metrics. So in the past, all the HPC monitoring was largely passive, right? It's basically count of HPC unit usage. But now there's a need to different type of platforms to provide more metrics. So a CI framework require, I would say, on-demand visual rendering of impact metrics. What that means is, you as a user, you ask for your own metrics to be displayed so you can report, for instance, for your fundings, or you can report to your institution how well you did through entire year, etc. So I'd like to show you two on-demand metrics kind of platform that I'm aware of. And one is Deep Insights Anytime, Anywhere. This is funded by NSF, interactive visualization platform. But the goal of that platform actually to help you as a researcher to understand funding portfolio. So what you get to see is what kind of programs, officers, institutions involved, different type of titles, and program profiles, basically, and PIs and co-PIs. So it allows you to gain a lot of information, like inside information about just specific NSF funding. All right, just it has a limitation, but at least it provides you on-demand metrics, which is very important. Allows you as a user to interactively communicate with the data. Right. The second example that we'll spend a little more time today is Open HD Metrics on Demand, or XDMOD. So this is one of the most maybe widely used software so far. It sounds like it have about 200 institutions that use this software, and it's built to evaluate HPC usage. Basically, it's built for cyber infrastructure center to be aware of what's happening, who is using it, etc. And it was developed as open software, so institutions just download and get cyber infrastructure work on it. And visualization and different metrics were developed at the Center for Computational Center at the University of Buffalo. But since it's open source, it basically anyone can use it and modify toward specific needs for institution in case if you need to add additional data. And we have a question.
I'm sorry, what does CI mean again?
CI, cyber infrastructure. Cyber infrastructure. So, what I'd like to talk a little bit today about different type of metrics to calculate investment. Because for strategic and especially financial planning, regardless whether it's just cyber infrastructure or maybe fundings, we need to understand the value, the intellectual value, and financial value. So by intellectual value, we can say publication. Financial value, it's not investment, it's more like funding, how much money you bring with your project. And then we compare with internal IT investment. Again, that may not be sounded like a very important question for us as a faculty or researchers. However, think about how much institution put money in. So our research depends how well our infrastructure is developed or evolved. But institutions also need to get some return on investment. So it's us as researchers, we give back by doing more publication, more funding, by using this type of infrastructure. So it's kind of, we want more infrastructure, and we also need to give something back in return. So, with that said, I would like to mention a couple of different ways to count or to evaluate intellectual or financial, I would say, impact, right? So you can look at fields of studies, and users. And by users, from now on, I talk about PIs. All right. Even though there's a caveat, because a lot of times PIs start using graduate students to work with HPCs, and so we have to build in the system how to bring it back in, because if you report only PIs, you miss a big chunk of graduate student work.
So how do you handle multiple PI projects? Are they all listed?
You have to build a core network. You have to
But
know
you
which
can
one.
do that,
Mhm.
because that's really critical, I think.
Right, it will be.
Yeah.
Mhm. And so in this specific project I want to mention, it was TerraGrid, NSF-sponsored Open Scientific Discovery Infrastructure. So they start with looking who are the users. And that's what you can do with XD mode, whether it's a graduate, staff, faculty, government, etc. Right? And then you can look at field of science, who you belong to. For instance, whether it's health work, whether it's aerodynamic, etc. And then you can look at something like, it's been done in 2011, so the visualization is not as intuitive, but you can see the clusters of, for instance, engineering, chemistry red, orange engineering. You see how much usage by those PIs are from HPC. All right. So the second, and of course this is affiliation. Here you see the affiliation between the PIs and co-PIs, so how they cluster. All right. So the second and more recent is you add publication record, not just field, but also publication records. And here where you understand the real publication impact of the usage of HPC. So what we do
Where do you get the publications from? Do the faculty have to enter them, or are they
So that's
required
something-
without that?
It's a great question, because you can go both ways. You can have automatically acquired publication records, but it's based if it's available through, let's say, NSF funding publication, for instance. So in our article that I can share later, we describe how you can collect this kind of information per individual. Or, so it could be both ways. It could be
See, for
individual.
here, you see, it's probably the most difficult thing for me to get.
Mhm.
I have no idea, because we don't have that information. I'm not going to ask every faculty member here to give me their
Absolutely,
publication.
yes.
So
Mhm.
it's really difficult to get that metric.
So that would be nice, and that's what at IU we're trying to force everyone to start building your own, make sure if you publish something, it's accessible through, it has PMID, for instance, numbers, have those identification numbers, or ORCID number, so that can be easily identified. And then by having users, and make sure do not change your first and last name between publications, right? So, and that's what gives chance to, for instance, Jane Center, if they start doing this as additional aspect to the HPC metric, you just have a name of users that translated to first and last name, and then from first and last name, you pull the information on the publication. That's what IU've done, and of course the caveat would be, what if you have two people with the same last name? And that's what a lot of, I don't know if you have your own ORCID number or research ID number. So if you do, that's great, because that's going to help them to pull all the information you need. All right, so and in this case, we can look at aggregates of, and different collaboration between the PIs, for instance. All right, now we are going to talk finally on return of investment. Interesting enough, there have been a lot of different applied forms to how to calculate this type of return of investment, including workforce development or scientific value. But it sounds like recently everyone stick to financial definition, which is, anybody here doing finances? No, the definition, financial definition of return of investment is a ratio that relates generated income to the resources used to produce that income. So if the value is greater than 1, then our return of investment is greater than investment. And that's what we'd like to have, basically. The challenge could be, as you all know, in many disciplines, it may take decades to generate this kind of, to materialize funding or publication. So this is not the best, but this is probably better than what it was. And that's why it's always good to, start fundings and do publication as soon as you get funding, so you can start generating return of investment. At IU, for instance, so we calculated in 2016, the average cost of Big Red 2, it's one of the supercomputers, was about $15 million per year. And in 2016, we also look at the grant income generated by IU, including PIs and co-PIs. So it was about 40 million. So that number, given to Cyber Infrastructure Report, give incentive to upper level to provide more money to evolve better cyber infrastructure. Right. And I think that's something that at UC you can look forward to generate this kind of number. How much money spent per cluster and how much funding been received for those or from those who use this specific cluster.
Every core facility should do that, and we have a lot that are subsidized, like IU does too, I'm sure. But we'd love to have this one be generating income beyond what it's putting in, but you know, it's not going to happen overnight.
It would also
Exactly.
be interesting to see the impact of the how many additional papers and you know, to see the trend of, can you see where having these resources available showed an increase
We
in
can
Over
sort of
time.
like social network analysis to see just what's happened.
Yeah, and also
How has it connected people? It generated a lot of new ideas and the new proposals that otherwise wouldn't have been written.
And over time, absolutely, like starting from, okay, we start new cluster, so what's happening in 5 years from now? Yeah, absolutely. And then, great. And so now it takes me to the interesting part of the topic for today is what we actually did with this XDMod platform. So, as you mentioned, OpenXDMod is just open platform that any institution can have. It's like a cyber infrastructure system. So what was added to it is value analytics. And this functionality offers metrics exactly on financial and scientific impact, but using, guess what, visualization plugins. It's something that goes on the top of this platform. It's just additional. So the aim actually to provide diverse visualization to measure IT usage, external fundings, not just NSF or NIH, any kind of external funding, because probably the same at UC as at IU, you have it somewhere, a recorder office, keep track of all the fundings, right? So put all the fundings, all the different agency that providing those fundings, and also publication related to each of those fundings.
Can we include industrial support in there?
You can, if you have records of it, yeah. And as long as you have PIs and co-PIs, and of course you can add even cross-institutional PIs, but then you have to figure out if the funding is a total for 2 institutions, then you have to split and see how much
We
money.
want to include state, local government, foundation, the whole thing,
Yeah, that would be.
if we could.
Yeah, and that's something I think, as long as you have data,
Yeah, right.
yeah, then you
Right.
can. Remember,
Yeah.
information is the current currency, so you need to get that currency. All right. So, and the key feature, and why, you're going to ask me, why do we need this visualization plugin? But it's just to help you interact, because you may be, let's say, like Jane, you want to see how much it generates or which cluster is more effective. But you can also see who else working on the same, in the same field, on kind of similar projects. So maybe you can build extra collaboration. And say, I'm in the chemistry, and there's PI who's generating a lot of fundings in this specific project. Maybe I should get in touch with that. Maybe we can develop another collaborative initiative.
So it could be used for recruitment too. That would be really valuable there, because
Absolutely.
we can't possibly know what everybody's doing.
Yeah,
So.
exactly. And of course you can, what's missing is the number of graduate students working on the project. That's in my opinion, a huge weakness, because you may have $1 million project, but PI never even touch HPC, right? So you have to figure out the way. Right now it's not built in, because you have to provide maybe a list of graduate students.
Are you working on that?
This project is,
Or somebody's working on that to include the graduate students and postdocs?
no, it's
It's
per
open source.
institution.
It's open source.
It's
okay.
open source, and it's per institution, yeah. So,
We could.
and the key feature exactly will be, again, interactive visualization is something that you can drill down or look at the big picture and you can scroll, so it gives you more interactivity. And of course, when you find your future collaborator, and then you can see all the publication that's been done by the person, for instance. You can have better, platform to talk and get involved in. All right. So how do we develop those visualizations and why they're important? So we look at, first of all, of course, IT usage. That's what, the main goal is. But we also look at grant incomes, publication, and collaboration between co-PIs and PIs. And the idea is to have two metrics, actually. Financial and intellectual analytics. So we look at publication and grant income of those people who use actual IT resources. We're not touching any project that, of course, there's a lot of maybe that never use clusters. And then finally, we look at collaboration, co-PI, exactly, to analyze the.
Right.
It's a break. We have lifestyle. All right.
Do you include IP? And it looks kind of narrow what you have. I don't want to debate all this stuff. I know you want to get through it, but this is just a starting point, I guess.
Oh, this is just translation of because this is we're talking about just two additional value plugins.
Okay.
One look at nothing but grant income, publication, and IT usage.
Okay.
The second visualization will look at all the collaboration and IT usage, and of course it will be linked to how much money they bring. So
I'm
this is
thinking
just
of intellectual property. There's all kinds of things you could include that impact the work.
Yeah, exactly. We haven't even touched patents. We haven't touched. We touch only publication that's provided by funding. But what if you publish something, and just think about it, it's not published, and you need to make sure that when you publish, it goes to as your. You have to acknowledge certain fundings, and each paper can acknowledge several fundings, right? So it could be a little bit challenged to figure out if one article linked to two different fundings, how do you generate the metrics? But this is all comes, like, with the time, we'll figure out how to do all that. Especially between UC and IU now, we got too many good brains now to figure out. All right. So the first visualization is, anybody knows what's it called? Sankey, good job. So in this funding and publication impact visualization, I'm going to show the static, but in a second I'll show you the more interactive way.
So what'd you call it?
Sankey.
S-A-N-K-E-Y.
Sankey.
And it came, I believe, from electric network.
Okay.
It's showing different way of combination.
I've seen it.
Okay, maybe you've seen it. So what we have here is, first of all, IT usage. And at IU, you probably will see big red cars, other ones, storage plus clusters. On the middle bar, you have funding types. Because each agency, right, gives different type of fundings. And here we look at this specific project, we look at different NIH and SF, but there's also other agencies. And on the right, all the publication that actually aggregated under journal scientific discipline fields.
So those are different NIH institutes, okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I see it.
And instead of just providing a large, I would say, amount of different publication, which makes sometimes no sense, right? Think about, I don't know, hundreds publication. We just group them by discipline. So we can see, for instance, the people who work on cars, for instance, 100 something users, and if you hover over, it tells you how many CPU usage units they use, for instance. And if you hover over, you can find that, okay, there's some came from this, the largest grant so far. And those bar graphs aggregated the way that showed the biggest fundings or the biggest usage of resources. And then you see a portion of those intellectual publication came from publishing in the brain research, for instance. And if you hover over, you see exactly how many out of 107, for instance. If you hover over, it tells you, okay, there is 54 articles out of brain research that use this grant, that used this specific resource at IT. So let me move to.
Can you explain that karst resource at IU? It's high throughput?
It's a cluster for job, just
Okay.
Yeah, and it's been for quite some time. I think they implementing every time new supercomputing resources, and I should probably look up, maybe they have another one developed.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you notice here, for instance, you're interested in big red, right? Or let's say in karst, and you might be interested in this specific type of users that use this grant, and you may see, for instance, that some of them came to brain research. Or you can go like, how many, okay, everyone who publishes in brain research right now, what do you use on average? And of course you see the variation, which is great. So it means they apply or they use all the resources available. Or it could be that you find out maybe maybe biology uses less, or
This looks kind of like you kind of arbitrarily created a little bit. I know at IU you have like a really good school of public health, but I don't see any of that up there. So it's kind of interesting. I mean,
School of
They
Public
might not
Health.
be using cluster though.
okay,
Yeah.
maybe you're right. Maybe they aren't. That's a valid
Yeah,
point.
that's
Well, you have a lot of the typical disciplines up there, and then at the bottom you have brain research and medical specialties. So it just looks to me like a little bit of a, you know,
Data is just data until you figure
Right.
out how to
Right.
combine it.
And this-
If that makes
yeah.
sense to them.
And the classification that we use actually was done by Kati and her team in 2015. So
Uh-huh.
there's more journals published,
Right.
and that's why we had to create this unclassified, because there's each journal belongs to discipline, right? And it needs to be updated almost like on a monthly basis.
and I know you guys are doing like grand challenges. You're putting a lot of money. I mean, this what IU's doing is incredible. But I don't see that up there yet. But maybe it's too early to
Too
show
early,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I see. I see. That's before that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you notice also multidisciplinary
Yeah.
discipline. That means it may have several of them involved. It's just all equally distributed.
Is Big Red 2 bigger?
Then,
The big red one?
how about I send you that article?
It's probably newer.
It's
Probably
newer?
has
It's newer, yeah, it is newer,
Yeah,
yeah. But also,
And it's probably good.
I
yeah.
was just wondering why there was more people on Big Red 2, or there was more
Mhm.
resources.
It was kind of
for
phasing out.
Yeah.
Big Red
Yeah.
one, okay.
Mhm. And it's also interesting to see unless here's the general picture. We don't have any time series, right?
Mhm.
But it would be crucial probably to know over time. This is a collection actually of papers for several years together. So it's not like per year, but it can be done. It just need to be. It depends of your goal. Depends on your question. But you want to see how it's evolved, or you want to see in general how much money this brings in, or respond to it. All right.
Yeah, I think we'd be interested in like our areas of excellence, like sensors, cancer, analytics, water. Now we have robotics, autonomy, AI. These are all growing areas. That's how I would want to do that if we could.
It sounds like,
to see
yeah.
what's the impact of these IT resources on those things.
Yeah, because you can modify Sankey by providing like exactly what you're interested in. So instead of, for instance, scientific discipline for publication, look about school,
Right.
all right? Or instead of finding type here, maybe look for something else, yeah.
Right. Right.
Exactly. All right, so that's one. And the second one is COPI collaboration network, which allow you to, when it pulls in together, which allow you to see, which is important, collaboration, and also money with collaboration together. For instance, it builds the horizontal bar graph the way it's sorted already out, and you see, hey, this person brings the most money to the institution from their grants, right? And if you click on those, you see who collaborates with them. Of course, it doesn't show you here what school they belong to, but it's a really good feature to have. But you see already collaboration circle.
But we can figure that out.
Mhm.
Yeah,
But that's how you would-
You've done the key information.
Yeah, and that's how you would look for, I guess, collaboration to build on. Let's see. All right, so truly, why do we need that? It's just to communicate literally the impact of our research and the impact of CI investment that help our research basically. And what we do, we just add this scholarly impact into just traditional usage or count of metrics.
See, I'd like to do this also for people in the arts, humanities, and social sciences. They don't get funding, but they do a lot of things, and they publish and they do all kinds. I'd like to have a way to show
That's a
our
great point.
leadership what they do, so we can give them internal support or whatever, you know, because
way-
it's hard to quantify.
It is, exactly. The way the plugin is built is that you input your own data, and just for this specific article purpose, we just focus on fundings for those who published and funded. We didn't include fundings that did not have publication. It's going to be another chunk. So you, in cyber infrastructure, have a list of all users and identifiers for each school. Then you can add additional criteria, which would be great. Because this is not representative of entire thing. This is just a small aspect to show how nicely you can build scholarly value into the monetary investment. So, but what it's not there yet, and it would be nice, and of course that means another funding, because that project was funded between you and Buffalo. Now the grant is done, and if they continue grant, then we can build all the, or any institution can do it, because you have access to the open XDMOD. So that would be nice to have automatic funding retrieval and publication retrieval, because right now you just upload data instead of just pulling it automatically. And we don't have additional, there was storage size, number of compute cycle. Different things can be added into visualization, basically, based on needs. So that was one part of me sharing with you how to calculate metrics in with respect to cyber infrastructure routine, right, and your research. But I also would like to share with you how to, what kind of metrics, new metrics, and how data visualization help to understand the educational attainment, workforce, and research publication. Because your publication is like between workforce and education. But what is driven by what? So the question is whether research drives the industry, or industry drives research and also education. And so this is a part of the presentation that I was instructed to ask you not to take any pictures and not to post on Twitter. So if you may restrain yourself from that would be great, because otherwise I'm going to jail. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so it's a secret, all right? Nobody's seen it yet. So you're the first one to basically see. So the idea is, how can we represent scientific landscape, but now with respect to workforce, research, and publication, and how can we align those? And the question is, how can we measure? Because it's very dynamic. It changes, as you know, labor force and courses, it changes pretty much every semester. So if you look at conceptual map, so the idea is to look at the level of skills, which skill can be, you know, programming language, it's a skill, right? Any kind of machine learning, it's a skill. PowerPoint presentation, it's a skill. So it's something that can be taught at school level or can be requested, demanded at the workforce when you apply for jobs, right? And there's also publication, research in between. So the idea is, can we align jobs, courses, education, and research? And can we find out or predict whether there's a specific item by skill? Again, think of that as a concept. Is there any specific concept, for instance, in publication that will drive more different course offerings, and it will be shown in 2 years in the workforce job postings? Or maybe it's other way around. Maybe it shows up at the workforce in Silicon Valley first, then it shows in publication, and then finally educational institution decide that's a missing course, we need to provide it. So it's all dynamically related, but what's driven by what? So that's the question, basically. So, and the idea is to provide those visual insights to help key decision makers. It could be dean of your school, it could be you yourself, trying to develop updated syllabus, right? Or it could be industry that collaborate with you, and you can say, I'm going to provide workforce for your industry with my class, because this is something that you should consider putting in your job posting, because it's very relevant. So first of all, what's difficult about a project like that, and you work probably with multi-data sets from different areas, so you need to build the crosswalk, right? And it's the most important, even merging funding and publication, trying to find this crosswalk between is difficult. So we look at job postings. We use the burning glass technology, which is labor market consulting and research company. And this is the count records of all the job postings that we have from 2010 to 2018. We also look at Web of Science, all the publications that are relevant to what we're looking at. And we look at courses, and we used open syllabus data, actually, that provide you access to syllabi that you can analyze linguistically. So we looked at skill taxonomy, which a list of skills associated with each job posting. So you can have statistic, for instance, right? You can have ability to drive a drone. It could be all as a skill, but also a concept of research. So we use that as our kind of dictionary, and then we parse all the publication, all the courses to extract specific courses and specific publication relevant to this concept. That's how we started. And if you notice, what's interesting, here's our, okay, we have jobs, a number of jobs, publication courses, but more particularly we're interested in data science, or data science and data engineering portion of jobs, of publication, and of courses. I have a small portion. And we look at, if you notice how many skills could be extracted from course syllabi, or job postings, or publication abstract. And to use that, and if somebody interested in this algorithm, we use the forward maximum matching algorithm, which basically word segmentation algorithm, so you can look up a bit later how we align these postings. But more interestingly, I'd like to share with you a couple of visual insights that we built as a result of this publication. First of all, we want to look at the burst of activities. And it's something you can, regardless of this topic, use also in your research. If you're interested in healthcare, for instance, you can look, what's the burst of activity, what's the most bursting right now topic in healthcare, what's the most bursting topic in NSF funding currently. So you can catch the idea and build your project around this idea. So we wanted to understand, and by bursting, we mean a sudden increase in certain concept over time, all right? And we used bursting algorithm, Kleinberg, but also in CNS, we developed a free tool, it's called Sci2, that provide anyone with this algorithm. So cyber infrastructure algorithm, so you can look at, if you're interested, I can show how it works, but it provides you burst strengths. For instance, interesting enough, you have a jobs and you have publication, and kind of interesting, but physics looks like was the most bursting concept in all the publication relevant to data science and data engineering. Then you have big data, social media. In the jobs, you have Facebook, and you may ask me, maybe just a mentioning of just follow me on Facebook, but no, that was a kind of skill extracted from what was mentioning in the jobs. So ability to communicate, I guess social media skills required in many job postings, maybe marketing, for instance. So then you have Cisco, Oracle. So as a teacher, for instance, if you know what's bursting right now, what's the most increasing activity, you can tell students, for instance, instruct them, hey, there's actually a lot of demand for those skills, right? Versus something else that they've been taught, but it's never used for, right? In publication, you may see what's, I guess, published mostly recently, right? So it allows you to see it. We also look at skills that belong to jobs and publication overlap. And we decided to look at them as a time series kind of format from 2010 to 2016. And here's the 18 skills that happen in both. So think about it. Jobs demand something that all of a sudden very active in publication. So what are those skills? So those are, for instance, Android, Apache Hadoop, energy engineering, Maxima, social media. Now, if you look at over time, so the green is publication, and the blue is jobs. It sounds like there's more bursting in later on in publication, and there's more bursting in 2010, 2013 in jobs. And there's a couple of jobs that burst at the same time, and it's really interesting. Electrical engineering here. Here's Apache Hadoop in 2016 occurred as a burst in publication and the jobs. It's very interesting. So it's very like a hot topic, I would say. All right, so then again, here we're looking at the activity of those concepts, right? Now, if you look at dynamic skill gaps and flow dynamics, so how can we see each, how close one skill to another one, for instance, or how far apart they are, or how can we actually geometrically represent those skills in 3 different areas. So that's what we decided to do. We decided to test centrality of skills that co-occur in job, in publication, courses, and jobs. And here's the most important, maybe 2 components: angle and radius. So by angle, you see how far or how close those skills are. And by radius, the closer to the center, the more prominent those skills are to this specific, to publication. And if you notice, you have communication skills, management, all central demand skills in jobs. So if you look at job postings, indeed, there's more required skills to have in those that usually in educational institution we don't teach. We don't really teach communication skills, right? A lot. But it's something.
I can tell you we do not teach those skills.
Great. And it's something that we should, and especially if you're in data science, for instance, being able to present, to communicate, to deliver, it's very important, but it's something is missing. And that's something for schools. If you see this kind of map, it tells you, indeed, there's a missing skill that our students really need to. And we even decided to talk to a chair of theater, drama department last semester to see if we can start communication course to teach our data scientist students how to talk, basically. And we had a presentation by Dean and, of course, actor, and it was just amazing. Delivery and how you hold your hands and how you talk, how you project your voice, everything is just something that we miss totally when we present, right? So, okay, and at the same time, so this is just, I would say, the first initial visualization of what can we extract from our data set that can be valuable, actionable to our teaching, publication, and can relate to also workforce. Because when we teach, we don't really 100% relate to the fact that students, when they're done, they'll be looking for jobs. So how well do we prepare them to be ready for the jobs? All right, so that's another important aspect of this work to align, if you wish, workforce with our teaching. And of course, research becomes in between, or maybe it's driven. So let's see what drives what. So we would like to see now if we can predict, or we can build a model that tells us which skills or which concepts is driven by education or is driven by publication or by jobs. So for this we used Granger causality. It's one of the algorithms that look at time series for jobs and publication. And we also aggregated now all the concepts by their taxonomy. It's more like family cluster level, so that we have better presentation. And if you look at closer to 0, this is publication driven. Closer to 1, this is job driven concepts. And what you see is, So we have media and writing, education, training, administration. All those concepts get their base in publication and somehow showed up in jobs later on. So it's kind of time-related causality measurement.
So what do those numbers mean? Bigger, larger the number, the more important?
The
Or-
larger number.
I always think of things from a simplistic viewpoint. So.
But if you look at from probabilistic point of view,
Yeah.
in this case, so closer to zero in this case, because
Yeah.
we're dealing with two different criteria. So closer to zero, the more it's driven by publication.
Oh.
In this case, it's like two
Oh,
sets.
I see. So, gotcha.
We have a question there.
Yeah, how are you defining publication? Are you talking about weighted journals or what is the,
Yeah, it's a very broad term.
Right.
Broad term. So publication is, we use Web of Science, and we extracted enormous amount of publication that had those concepts in their abstract or titles.
yeah, but could there be, is it any publication? Because we certainly have a lot of, invalid or fraud publications going out these
Yeah.
days.
This is a great
And our
question.
engineers do a lot of conferences and proceedings, grade publications, which are just as important
Right.
and maybe just as innovative.
But as long as the publication is in Web of Science, then we use it as a data.
Okay.
So this is a great point to kind of narrow down and make your data more clear in a way that you can, okay, you start with this and see the big picture, and now what about how can we create an algorithm? And for those of you who are interested in machine learning or data science, how can we create algorithm that help institution to cipher from fraud publication and non-fraud publication?
Right.
So it's like additional step, and that means another collaborative interdisciplinary project, because this was more data analysis and visualization. Here it's more machine learning involved project, which is great actually. Good point, yeah, definitely. All right, so this is something that tells you that environment, and interesting enough, economic policy concept came from workforce, right? And later on they appeared in publications. And this is not, this is one of those, and I need to kind of caution you, this is one of those exploratory data analysis. We're not trying to, we don't have causality in it, meaning it's not a causal or mechanical presentation. It's more like, okay, this is the first picture. Can we dig deeper and see what we can actually get out as far as for policy concerns, for instance? Yeah.
I like how you have the two different endpoints of job-driven versus publication-driven, but also I think what's interesting is what's in the middle.
Right, the
You know,
courses, for instance.
You got the analysis, you have the IT, and so I think it's really interesting that is in the
Oh, I
middle
see that,
because
yeah.
it's, you know,
Design.
I would think it'd be over on the job-driven side. That's my bias.
yeah.
Right.
But it's neat that it's actually contributing to both sides.
Yeah,
kind of
It is,
equally,
yeah.
Right,
That's
to
what it
the
means.
publication
Okay.
and to the job.
Yep.
So
It's a great point. It's a great point. Let me quickly show you this one very complicated image that I know some of you have to run. So this is combination of two base maps. This is jobs with all the skills in it. You can't see them because they're little bitty dots. This is all publication, all skills, little bitty dots. Of course, they align, but we didn't put any alignment unless it's very important statistically. So they were some skills that were statistically important, as you saw in Granger causality, and we just made arrows between, okay, immunology, for instance, drives from publication to jobs, and it's a very thick arrow. So it means it's a lot of power in that, in this F value. So what it means is, if you were a policymaker or a dean of school, for instance, you may see that potentially, again, it's potentially, you may predict that in the future you have more jobs with immunology as a job requirement postings. And of course, vice versa, the arrow would show you which way. And only 3 actually jobs, concept that were related together both ways, like bidirectional, which is computational tools, product knowledge, and trial design. So they were driven like each other. So they were not really, that's interesting. just both directional. All right, so this is a dynamic strength of influence. And just to show you why those things can be important, actually for university, it's a decision about program creation, or to me, it's more like even course syllabus creation. I want to provide more tools that are relevant. And if you probably, I know there's a lot of R users here, right? And if you look at job postings and compare data demand or job demands for R versus job demands for Python, it's going up, right? So more courses should be teaching, for instance, R in addition to other things, but it's not yet. All right, so students understand workforce, basically. Employers, just potential skill gap too, and more collaboration maybe between institutions. Then of course we can have economic developers and policymakers all being involved. And let me just show you what we in CNS also do in addition to data visualization and this type of analysis. So we create a lot of basically different tools and maps that some of them you see. This is the idea to create exhibition that deliver your messages, but not as presentation, but it's more like map. Put your entire project in a way that people can read, and if you have chance, you can walk around and see some of them very, it takes you time to read them, but it also different interpretation of your data. And we also do the exhibitions in museum settings, but also in the libraries, where you can have your, I don't know, your research basically become visible to all the people who comes to museum, for instance, or to library. And every year we have called for iteration, like a map iteration. So if you have some idea and project of some very cool looking map with your data, like, I don't know, animal gazing, I would need. Like, say if you could put animal gazing research in those maps, that would be awesome. So you can kind of think of that and become part of next iteration, basically, and then you'll be exhibited in museums, for instance. And then finally, we also teach IVMOC, which is information visualization course, and can be taken, it is online, but can be taken for free. So if you're interested to kind of brush up your visualization skills and all the tools that we've been using, feel free to sign up and try it out. So it's a free online course, you won't be graded, so feel free to kind of take it on your time and learn more. And different publication that have been done in CNS also, the entire idea is to increase literacy, or to help with literacy of data visualization. And I'd like to thank you for this opportunity, and we'll be moving to Shining very soon, but feel free to stay in touch, and I'm glad to hear your comments. Would love to collaborate if we can, and just thank you for bringing me to UC.
Thank you.